भारती न्यूज, सीधा, सटीक और निष्पक्ष।
A very warm welcome to everyone. I, Dr. Ritika Malik, on behalf of Bharatiya Vidyapeeth Educational Complex, extend a warm welcome to four exceptional women whose contribution to the legal profession have been truly transformative. Honorable Justice Asha Menon ma'am, Senior Advocate Jyotika Kalra ma'am, Senior Advocate Priya Hingurani ma'am, and Advocate Sangeeta Mehrotra ma'am. The 2 days national seminar, Courtroom to Boardroom, Law, Media and Management, panel discussion 2, and the second day on the day of Women's Day special. On the topic Women in Leadership, Breaking Barrier in Law, Media and Business. Each of these remarkable individuals have made significant strides in shaping legal disclosure, advocating for justice, and strengthening the rule of law in our nation. Now, with this, I request Dr. Ritika Vasan ma'am, Deputy Director, BVI CAM New Delhi, to felicitate our guest. I request Ritika Vasan ma'am to felicitate our guest, Senior Advocate Jyotika Kalra ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am. Now I request Ritika Vasan ma'am to kindly felicitate Asha Menon ma'am, Honorable Justice Asha Menon ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am. I request ma'am again to felicitate Senior Advocate Priya Hingurani ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am. I request ma'am to felicitate Advocate Sangeeta Mehrotra ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am, on this special day of Women's Day. Heartily thankful to all our panelists for coming here and making this giving guidance to our esteemed audience. Now I invite Ms. Shruti Tandon, who is going to be the moderator of this panel discussion. Ms. Shruti Tandon is an alumnus of National Law University, Punjab, and is a gold medalist in constitutional and administrative law. Over to you, ma'am. We welcome you. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ritika Malik, for this wonderful welcome address. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests and distinguished panelists. It is my absolute privilege to welcome all of you to today's event. We are gathered here to witness and celebrate the invaluable contribution of some of the most accomplished legal professionals in India, people whose work and passion have shaped the legal landscape both in India and internationally. Moreover, I'm extremely delighted to have the opportunity to interact with such an accomplished all-women panel on International Women's Day. I welcome all the panelists. First, I'd like to extend a heartfelt thank you to our esteemed panelists whose presence here today reflects their immense commitment to justice, equality, and legal reforms. We are honored to have you with us. I'd like to welcome Honorable Ms. Justice Asha Menon, former judge of the Delhi High Court, whose distinguished judicial career stands as a testament to her deep commitment to fairness and justice. With over 3 decades of legal service, her impactful decisions have left a lasting legacy in the field of law. We're very, very delighted, ma'am, that you're here to share your words of wisdom with us today. I'd also like to welcome Ms. Jyotika Kalra, former member of NHRC and advocate on record of the Apex Court of India and a strong advocate for gender justice and human rights. Her tireless work in advocating for the rights of women, children, and marginalized communities has touched countless lives and has led to significant legal reforms. Thank you so much, ma'am, for being with us today. I'd also like to welcome Senior Advocate Priya Hingorani, Senior Advocate at the Supreme Court of India, whose exceptional legal career spans multitude of fields, including constitutional law, human rights, and commercial law. Her expertise and passion for justice continues to inspire generations of legal professionals. And last but not the least, I'd like to welcome Advocate Sangeeta Mehrotra, an accredited mediator and legal consultant with over 34 years of experience. As an expert in ADR, she has played a pivotal role in promoting mediation as an effective tool for resolving conflicts. Her dedication to fostering peace and resolving disputes is commendable. Thank you so much for being here, ma'am. Today, we are not just here to acknowledge the accomplished people who sit before us today. We're also here to gain knowledge and insights from their wisdom that they have gained throughout their legal careers. Each of these remarkable individuals have touched different facets of the legal world, but they share a common thread: their unwavering dedication to justice, fairness, and rule of law. As we listen to their thoughts and reflections, I encourage each one of you sitting here to think about how we, as members of the society, can contribute to make our legal systems more accessible, inclusive, and just for all. Without further ado, I'd like to begin with this enriching session. The session we're gathered here today for is a panel discussion for women in leadership, breaking the barriers in law, media, and business. So, ma'am, my first question is to Honorable Ms. Justice Asha Menon. Ma'am, the Supreme Court of India has had a disproportionately low number of female judges. With systemic change, what systemic changes are needed, or what kind of institutional changes may be introduced which are needed to increase the women representation in higher judiciary today?
Thank you for the welcome and the introduction. One systemic change I have already seen in this room. You see the number of young girls who are doing law. Fundamentally, if you see what is the age group of the people who are reaching the Supreme Court, it's about like my generation or a few years younger to me. In our time, law was not such a high priority for man or woman. I mean, so when men are not so much inclined, where's the woman getting inclined to do law? Today, that's not the position. Unless you have a source, a pool of resources, there's no point saying why there are few in the Supreme Court. You can have only about 34 judges in the Supreme Court. But that doesn't mean the legal field is also as narrow as that for a proportionate representation for man or woman. But my point is this, that one should look into the present. It takes a long time to reach the Supreme Court. You move step by step, whether it is in the legal career as a lawyer or as a judge. You have to put in years of effort and sweat into whatever you have chosen, and then look towards the Supreme Court. I would say that the more irksome thing was that women lawyers were not considered for being senior advocates. So now I'm flanked by three senior advocates. Two senior advocates. So you see, that's where there was such a little bit of angst, because even amongst the few women who chose the legal field and stuck to it despite lots of challenges, there was a disinclination amongst the courts to confer on them because it's a conferment, which again confounds me, but it's a conferment. So why not? Why didn't the courts confer the senior gown to women? Was it because of an unfair comparison? Was it a threat, a sense of threat? I don't know. Because I feel that if more women became senior advocates, well, they're right there to compete with the men. So maybe that's why, they may not have done that, because I have, in my career, seen fantastic performances by advocates, and they're sitting here on either side of me too. But what I'm saying is that is one of the reasons that once you expand the number of people who are there in the field of law and you can choose from them, then if there is such a lack of choice, then one can complain. There have been a couple of high courts, including the Delhi High Court, where at one point of time we had some 11 or 13 women judges. So it is not as if things haven't improved. It is also not as if that, people are, have a bias against women becoming judges. I don't really say that, but there are other challenges for women which may interfere with them performing to their utmost in any field, whether it is the judiciary or whether it is the legal field. So that's the thing, that systemic is like this. When you have the pool, there are no other biases I have come across. They won't say that because you're a woman, I will not take you. Except, as I said, the small window of the senior advocates counts.
Thank you so much, ma'am. We're also very glad that we'd be also seeing the first female Chief Justice of India soon. So that is a testament to how much we've progressed as a society and how women have now become an integral part of the Indian judicial system.
So the question sometimes arises, should you have reservation for women in the judiciary? Well, we've always not quite gone down that path despite being in the system. But unless you have that 1/3 available to you, what's the point of just saying we need reservation? That's another aspect.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Ma'am, I'd like to pose the next question to Advocate Jyotika Kalra, ma'am. Ma'am.
Your name?
Ma'am.
Shruti.
Ma'am, we've seen a very tragic event which has happened in Calcutta very recently. So I'd like to frame my question around that tragedy. So despite the fact that we've had plethora of women-centric laws for women's safety and to protect women, incidents like the Calcutta tragedy still persist, and that one event did gain a lot of media attention. But even apart from that, there have been several incidents over the years which has happened and they continue to happen at every part of the country. So what are the gaps in policy implementation regarding women's safety, and how can leaders in law and business collaborate to address these deficiencies effectively?
So thank you, Shruti, and thank you, Bharati Vidyapeeth, for inviting me, and thanks all the students being here. Look, women's safety or security, it's a very big question, and the laws are already there, and very effective laws are there. And the best amongst, when we talk of the Kolkata rape case, the most targeted law is sexual harassment of women at workplace. She was at her workplace. Look at the behavior of the hospital on that night. They initially gave the reporting that it is a suicide, and it was a hospital. Where there were doctors, and those doctors said that it was a suicide. So they wanted to hush it up. They didn't want to show that it was a sexual harassment of women at workplace. It happens anywhere and everywhere. Yes. Wherever, I go, I try to find out that notice at the conspicuous place, because the Act provides for it, that the constitution of the committee should be notified at a conspicuous place. I remember in Supreme Court, there were notices outside the lift or at some notice boards, but I couldn't find the one at High Court because when I was coming and I was thinking of it. And conspicuous place would always be the notice board. So laws are there, and why I'm saying so, why these notices are, why it's not being put deliberately, because wherever I go as a resource person to discuss about this law, I always ask them that where is your notice? Because they are hesitant in putting that notice at a conspicuous place, because they feel that if I'll put a notice, I'll start getting multiple complaints. So that is the question of mindset. Law is there and law provides for it. And law also says that if you violate, there will be consequences to follow. But still, the organizations avoid putting that. That is point number one. The point number two, as my experience is, whenever, because the law also provides for the awareness programs as far as the law is concerned, regularly to make people aware of the provisions of the act for both male as well as female. And my experience is, in most of the awareness programs where there are male, their first reservation is that this law is being misused. I don't say that the law is not misused, but the law, on the face of it, the very first response to the law is that this law is being misused. It is used for specific purposes. So for making the workplace safer, this cannot come by law. This cannot come by the state alone. That has been done. It is for all of us to realize that this can happen only when, like when you refer to the Kolkata case, while those awareness programs are being conducted, there should be a targeted discussion with the girls, with the females, that what are the areas in your compound which are vulnerable, where there is no light, where you feel scared. So those areas should be identified. Girls should be asked what kind of a security or safety you expect. So that has to be at every workplace. And then I think the issues, the incident, and Calcutta is not one case or not an isolated case. Rapes happen. NCRB data is there. I'm not repeating that. But to check it, we all have to be very sincere and answerable, that we all owe a responsibility towards the safety and security at the workplace. I think I've answered your question.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Your suggestion of having a female gaze into the implementation of law, I think, will go a long way to sort of making it more effective rather than a male gaze into law, is what we see in the legislature today. Thank you. My next question is to Senior Advocate Priya Hingorani, ma'am. Ma'am, the appointment of Kamala Harris as the first US Vice President and other women taking up key leadership areas in the international or the global fora has been quite evident in the past, let's say, past one decade. However, India somehow has not kept up with the pace of it. So what lessons can India and other nations draw from such progress?
Good evening, and I'm sorry, I really have a very bad throat, so kindly excuse my hoarse voice. I would look at it another way. I think India has had one of the many women leaders, starting from, the post the Constituent Assembly, where the women who participated in bringing about the Constitution of India, who were stakeholders in that, and then onwards to having first woman Prime Minister Indira Gandhi and then the President of India. So I think we are holding the torch. We are torch bearers in our own way. And I wouldn't compare our country to the US or the UK or any of the European countries, because in our own way, seeing the population that we have in our country, which is far more, of course we must have many more leaders and women leaders, but we haven't done that bad as well in our country. So I would look at it in a positive way and say, we have done well, but we can do much more. And what is heartening now in the last 2 decades is that many women, not only in the five-star cities as we call ourselves, Delhi, Bombay, Calcutta, Madras, Chennai, even in the two-tier cities, even in the panchayat level, women are coming forward and participating in leadership roles. Even if we say that there are some men backing them or they are rubber stamps in panchayats, particularly as the women are in the front, but it's the men who are. But at least they are there. The face is of a woman. And over the years, they have started taking or being part of the decision making. So, but as far as the legal profession is concerned, I do have a comment to make on that. I think there is a lot to be done from the side of the government, from the side of our judiciary, to encourage and to make it more women participatory, which is not so. 75 years now, we don't have the first Attorney General. We don't have a woman who's been an Attorney General. We haven't had a woman who's been the Solicitor General. There's no dearth of good lawyers. There's no dearth across the country. Very often, very good women judges, like one we have right next door to me, should have come to the Supreme Court. Why not? Because, you know, when you look at, when it's the collegium sits and discusses the, you know, the representation across the states, across the, you know, the, I would not, religion, you're right. And so they always would go for more for men than for women. And that's what we have been fighting for. I can say for Sangeeta, Jyotika and me, and of course many other women lawyers who have been representing and saying that it's not necessary to have a mediocre male judge. It's better to have a brilliant woman judge than have a mediocre male judge. I'm sure ma'am can't say that, but we can voice our thoughts. So I think it's very important to continue having this discourse, the dialogue, keep putting pressure, having pressure groups, whether it is in the judiciary, in the legal profession, or at the government level, or in national or international politics. Women have to work harder, have to fight harder, have to prove themselves much more. Even as lawyers, even I think as professors, women have to, you know, prove themselves much more. So we have come a long way, but there's a lot more to be done.
Thank you so much, ma'am. This reminds me of a discussion I was having with a colleague where they said soon we'll also see that all the bar associations will be headed by women because they're far more meticulous and organized in the way they work. Where the bar? Not yet. Thank you so much, ma'am. My next question is to Advocate Sangeeta. Ma'am, women in leadership often face workplace conflicts, including, but not limited to, just discrimination and a lot of gender bias. How can mediation be used as a leadership tool to resolve these conflicts and create a more inclusive work environment?
Good afternoon, everybody present here from the student fraternity and the faculty and the distinguished guests. I am telling you that I have been given the questions, I have put up the notes and all. I will read it out from my note. I truly believe mediation is a transformative leadership tool that empowers women in leadership to address workplace conflicts arising from discrimination and bias with clarity, confidence, and grace. By providing a structured and confidential space, mediation opens the door to honest conversations where concerns can be voiced without fear of judgment or retaliation. It encourages collaborative problem solving, nurturing mutual understanding and respect while breaking down unconscious bias. Through this approach, women leaders not only assert their positions with strength and empathy, but also foster inclusive, and cooperative environments. By choosing dialogue and negotiation over confrontation, they lead by example, inspiring a culture of respect and collaboration. Mediation also plays a vital role in uncovering systemic biases, paving the way for policy reforms and organizational change that benefit everyone. Most importantly, it builds trust and psychological safety, empowering employees to address conflicts constructively rather than withdrawing or leaving. It helps create workplaces where every individual feels heard, valued, and supported, laying the foundation for a truly equitable and inclusive environment. After all, creating more inclusive work environments is essential for fostering diversity, improving employee satisfaction, and driving innovation. An inclusive workplace not only welcomes people from all backgrounds, but also ensures that all employees feel valued, respected, and supported. This is a continuous process that requires commitment from all levels of the organization. By implementing inclusive hiring practices, promoting cultural awareness, supporting diverse work styles, ensuring equal opportunities for advancement, and holding leadership accountable, companies can create a workplace where all employees feel valued and empowered. An inclusive workplace not only fosters better morale and employee retention, but also drives innovation, enhances problem solving, and helps attract a broader talent pool, contributing to the overall success of the organization. Shruti.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I could not have thought of a better person to answer this question with respect to mediation, since you have 34 years of experience with respect to that. Ma'am, my next question is again to Justice Asha Menon. Ma'am, while you have touched upon this topic, I just want to take a follow-up on that, which is, despite constitutional guarantees of equality, gender bias still exists pretty much within the courtroom and in the bar room, as you've already pointed out. That such thing we've seen with respect to the designation or the conferment of senior advocates. So what do you think, as women lawyers or women judges, what steps can be taken by them to make the judicial fraternity more inclusive of more and more women advocates and women judges, hopefully?
Now, when you talk of courtroom bias, I would assume that it is a bias that happens within the courtroom. There, I don't, there are biases. I wouldn't say no to that. But within the judiciary as such, if you're talking about the judges amongst their interaction, whether there is gender bias, no. That is not, there'll be personal likes and dislikes, but a personality conflict cannot be upgraded to a gender conflict. So I don't think that there is such a gender bias in the relationship. However, in the bar, I think it is different, and I'm seeing it from the other side of the bar. So definitely, if a young or a woman is putting up a case that's very well done, then her colleagues would just say, will be very dismissive of her efforts. Now, whether that is a general gender bias, I should think so, because in every field you would find that there is a general superiority of a man. That's believed, ingrained. I am superior to a woman. So therefore, when a woman is performing well, if it happens to be before a male judge, it is dismissed and say she'll get the order because she is, a woman. And immediately you're putting down the judge. The poor judge may be as fair as, any lady judge. And that's also unfair on that judge. But this is one dismissive way. And second thing is that they may look at her, there's a personal experience that happens there, as, because she's so outspoken, she may be, kind of, to put a very poor word, available, and which challenges the woman as a professional as well as an individual. That's a huge challenge. As far as the women on the bench are concerned, when we sit in the court, I don't think that the lawyer or the judge is quite aware of your age and gender. It's the works environment is such. So a lawyer, male or female, would always address the court with that due regard. So therefore, there is no, a negative play with the lawyers of whatever gender. So this is how the courtroom works. Now, whether we in the working of a court, would there be difficulties, gender biases? It's possible. If you see, for instance, a matrimonial case, then of course a mediator and your senior advocate is here. But what I'm saying is that supposing a woman is becoming rather hysterical in her presentation of a case, there may be a kind of a response, whether knowingly or unknowingly, as a response, whether it is a male judge or a female judge, matters not. I'm talking of a judge. That if this woman is like this here, God knows what she would be at home. That's a bias. That's being dismissive of somebody's difficulties. So, is that possible? Maybe possible. Another one, supposing you are dealing with, trafficking, for instance, or you're taking, the prevention of immoral trafficking, this, that, and the other, and you are seeing a woman who is indulging in sex work, you may be dismissive because it's a societal bias. So you may also suffer that bias. So you will not try to understand that woman because she is what she is. And similarly, in promise to marry rape cases, again there is a attitudinal problem, because many times, I won't blame the judge for that, many times after 10 years of a relationship, you suddenly come and say that fellow has, promised to marry and a rape. So, as she said, there is misuse. So when you have out of 10 cases, 6 cases of this kind of misuse, the 7th, 8th, 9th and 10th kind of get, blurred. So that's also gender bias because you're not willing to listen to the woman as a woman and, individual cases. So the woman has to probably take an extra effort to put across the case. So that does happen. And as far as judges are concerned, there are training programs to avoid this kind of thing. We have got the National Judicial Academy in Bhopal. Every state has got a judicial academy. And the effort is made to eliminate these kind of biases because everywhere the concern is that there must be fair dispensation of justice. And that is a primary concern. So that happens. People come from different backgrounds. They have got different views. But like in the National Judicial Academy, for instance, all over India, people come. Exchanges of thoughts and processes, discussions, and then people move on. I mean, that's a very good, aspect that I think generally people don't know, that we have these kind of training programs. And she is one big trainer that has, done immensely in this field. So we've been all sensitized by her. So she's a good teacher. So that's one thing that I would like to say. Another one I would like to say about the difficulty of, in gender. In administration and in provision of infrastructure, for instance, there is a bias. There is a gender bias. Why? Because the men don't know what the woman needs. That's the reason. And are the women there in administration? Not necessarily, because far too junior. You can't put them as, administrative judge anywhere. So, and it becomes sometimes very, very basic, like provision of toilets. And if you ask me, yes, that's a big that is gender bias, huge. It's across, it's not just in courts. I remember somebody had gone to on an inspection to some, it is a public sector undertaking, gone to an inspection in a little interior. There's no toilet for a woman. Why? Because no woman had ever come there. So they never knew that they need such a situation. You can't blame. Yeah. So that's one other thing. Of course, many other things like creches and this and that. That, of course, if I think there is some question like that also, or do I just mention it here and then? I can do that. That also. See, the challenges for women when they are either as judicial officers or judges or lawyers. One, as I said, toilets are a big problem. Now things are a bit better, but it's only a bit better. So the second thing is about, the woman having to face the additional challenge of taking care of children. And that's one of the reasons why people would say that you do law, but you go into the academics, because you'll have holidays and you'll have X number of hours and you can come home and you can take care of the children. Children are very important. So there is a prioritization of the challenges faced by men in their profession, and the women have to take a kind of a double role, and there are no excuses for that. So what happens is, children are left in the cars, children are left in the, in the hall, somewhere here, there, everywhere, and then the lady goes and does half her mind is where the child is safe or not, and then half mind is here presenting the case. Does that affect her performance? Of course it will affect the performance. So then she will pay for it, because, in comparison to a very, the man with a woman behind his success would be always, at peace when he is arguing a matter. So that does affect the performance, and that's why the woman has to, kind of do more to establish her credentials rather than that of a man. So provision of children. Then suddenly if the child takes sick, I'm one person who has no problems acknowledging that women are different from men. And we do have certain sentiments, we do have a certain outlook, and society benefits out of that, and we also should never exchange that for having all male sentiments in our head. Sorry. We are women and we are quite fantastic as we are. So we may have even our own self having a certain priority. A sick child will be more important to us than going to the court. So will the court adjust? During, a woman may want to become a mother. Her early days of pregnancy may be very troublesome. Will the court adjust her? If if you're in service, you will have, initially in our time, we had about 1.5 months after birth. And then it has become 3, and now it's 6, and all that has happened. So for a lawyer, would the judges be equally accommodating to say that, since she has just had a baby, so can you date it after 3 months, 6 months? Would the judge immediately say, oh, what a long date? Or will they say, okay, yeah, you are entitled to it? So these are all, certain issues that only a woman, recently Justice Nagaratna highlighted certain other issues. But what I'm saying is that understanding, sometimes a woman is very hesitant to tell these reasons because of her natural shyness. It's not a negative thing. But do we understand, do we factor in when a woman who's a lawyer goes on maternity leave, say for a year, can she come back to the profession and start where she left? There's no support system for that. Absolutely none. And I remember about 3 years ago when I was still a judge, I had mentioned this, when the bar association had kind of asked me to speak, and I said that this is something one must, the bar associations, bar council have to think about, that continuity of practice, that's important. That will again impact how many years service did you have to go to the high court. So there's so many issues, but mainly professional assistance of this nature is sadly lacking as of now, and that's a challenge that women will face till they take things into their hands and work it out, I think.
Thank you,
Thank
ma'am.
you.
Just one small observation I made that if you could give your opinion on, is this really befuddles me a lot of times, that a male judge is just a judge or a male lawyer is just a lawyer, whereas it's always a female judge or a female lawyer. Oh, she's a very good female lawyer. Do you think that's also some sort of biasness which is coming through?
I have not really seen that she's a good female judge. No, she's a good judge. Or she's a rotten judge. We have rotten judges too. It's not as if all is fair in the fair world. But I have not seen that. But the other thing is different. That when a woman lawyer performs well, then they are more backbites than which a man may get. Man may get an admiration. Oh my, maybe we should give another case to that fellow. But for a woman, you're saying, oh my, she's too overbearing or whatever else. They can add all kinds of descriptions. That's the only thing. I don't think that there is a description of she is a good lawyer will itself signify it's a female. So I don't think that much is there. Yeah.
Thank you so much, ma'am. My next question is to Jyotika ma'am. Ma'am, it's in relation to what Asha ma'am just said. She was talking about maternity benefit. So what I'd like to ask you is, the current policies, such as the maternity benefit or equal pay for equal work or anti-harassment measures, do you think they're sufficient as of today to support the women in leadership, or do you think we should make some changes? And if you could give us an insider view of the NHRC, since you were a part of it. So what role can NHRC play to make this better?
I don't think there is any specific role to be played by NHRC to begin with. Now you come to the maternity leave. And maternity leave, when we say, that means paid maternity leave. Okay? So the organizations are reluctant in appointing unmarried girls or newly married girls, considering that there would be a burden of maternity leave. That is a fact, because that's an economic burden which the organizations are going to have. Madam has explained very well, because bearing a child, giving birth to a child, feeding a child is not a women's exclusive duty. It's a society's duty. She is not bringing a child for herself or for her husband only. She is bringing maybe a future judge or a future doctor or a future teacher. So it's for all of us to ensure that the child is in safe hands. So that's another thing. But the society doesn't take it like that up till now. Because we recently, I must share, the matter was regarding the paid maternity benefit for a lawyer who was on panel of DLSA, Delhi Legal Service Authority. Yes. Okay. So the single judge in Delhi High Court gave her that benefit. She was on roll kind of a thing. Her appointment was marked in the morning at 10. Up till 5 she was there. She had to be, she was not supposed to do anything else. She got the benefit at the first level. But at the division bench, that order was reversed, saying that DLSA lawyer who is there on contract maybe for 3 years or something, she is a professional. She has to be paid a fees. So this always comes, if this maternity benefit is being given to a DLSA consultant, then it will bring a huge burden on all other things. So division bench reversed that order. And then I only filed before the Supreme Court, and my only plea to begin with was, as of now, the countries are giving incentive to the women for giving birth to the children. It is in Europe and in other countries also. The women are getting incentives. Not only paid maternity leave, but they are getting, like in dollars, rupees. The families are getting incentives for giving birth to the child. So then the judge said that's a policy measure. I'm not commenting on that. But the notice, at least the notice was not issued for that, where the only point was that the consultant who had worked for 3 years, she should have given the paid maternity leave. This I'm talking about Delhi. This I'm talking about Delhi High Court and Supreme Court. So not only that, when this matter of permanent commission to women in the army was concerned, the government of India on record had said that the women will be pregnant and then the government organization would be burdened with the maternity benefit. It is on record. So law is there. And I tell you, NHRC, when you are saying NHRC, in NHRC, where there is a mandate provision for 6 months, but it is for the Maternity Benefit Act, which is for private organization. So there was an employee, permanent employee of NHRC, and they were also not giving any maternity benefit to the contractual employees, consultants. When I was there, so I got, because NCW was giving, so somehow they introduced the 3-month paid maternity leave for the consultants who were not on regular roles. And I'm giving you an example of a woman who was on role of NHRC, almost a government employee. When her 3 months leave was over or something like that, she got a notice from the organization that you come and join, or before that. And then she approached them that there is a provision for 6 months maternity leave. She got an answer that because that is only for the private organization. She got a reply that leave is always a discretion of the management, of the employer. Nobody has a right on the leave. This is on record she got. And then he also showed me that legal provision which says CCS rules or something, there's a leave is the prerogative of the employer. Nobody can seek leave as a matter of right. And then there was hue and cry and all that. Somehow that woman was given paid maternity leave of 6 months. A government employee I'm talking. So because of the economic leave provisions are there, but everybody thinks that by giving the money to her when she is not working, it will cause a loss to the organization. Forgetting that the woman who is giving birth to a child, she is doing a service to this society, she is doing a service to this country, she is doing a service to this nation. So that is, and again, if you talk to, majorly so because there are not women at the leadership positions. There are not women up till now are not there in the leadership positions. So the man thinks in their own manner that yes, better if we have a male, if we have a man, he can serve us better. He will not go for maternity leave. He will not go for now L&T had it. Paternity is I think 15 days, but 15 days. L&T has also introduced menstrual 1-day leave. That's also a criteria that why should the women, because I remember when I joined NHRC, there was no common room for women in that organization. I said on record that women have menstruation. They need to have a place to relax during that menstrual period. And they need to have some place where the sanitary napkins are available. So we don't even discuss these issues. We think that workplace is workplace. So women, when at workplace, she needs to be treated with all those physical, I would call it a quality or better than a man. So that has to be recognized, that has to be respected. How will that happen? That I'm not saying that it is not happening and it may not happen again. That is not my point, nor do I want to say that, because I am here because of all the benefit I got where I was growing up. And but apart from the menstrual and this maternity leave and everything, I would like to add 2 more things which also need consideration, which is also so apparent as far as gender biases are concerned. One, even till now, not welcoming a daughter. First daughter, okay, but when it comes to second, people in any which case think that there should be a son. But for third, there is like a serious and a genuine problem that the third child should be a son when you have 2 daughters. Number 2, as far as the dowry is concerned, even till today, the marriage is always the responsibility of the girl's side. You may say that the boy's side also spends that much of money, but organizing the marriage affair and gifting dowry, whatever things, still continues to be a daughter's family's, a girl's family's responsibility. If for a girl to marry, she will have to ensure that that much money is there, even for an IAS officer or for a judicial officer. And finally, even till date, right in the property. Till date, the family, the society is not prepared. You may say that I also myself got a right in the property. My mother had bequeathed that property. But there are exceptions. These are the exceptional situations. Even till date, when a daughter claims right in the property of the father, there is a hue and cry. And all those wills which are written, wasiyat jisko bolte hain, they are all written to disentitle their own daughters from the property which she might succeed because of law of succession. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. My next question is to both Priya ma'am and Sangeeta ma'am. Ma'am, India has seen an increase in women-led startup in the recent times. However, access to funding remains to be a very major issue, and there is data to say that the women-led startup usually get lesser funding as opposed to the male-led startups. So how can venture capital firms and policy makers work together to ensure more women entrepreneurs succeed?
I'll come up with some data I've collected. Indian tech startup ecosystem ranks second after the US in terms of all-time funding raised by companies with women founders. With a total capital mobilization of $26 billion seen in this space till date. India is home to over 7,000 active women-led startups, accounting for 7.5% of all active startups in the country. India's women-led unicorn journey has experienced highs and lows marked by a remarkable surge in 2021 with 8 new unicorns and steady growth in 2019, 2020 and 2022. However, 2017, 2023 and 2024 saw no new unicorns, indicating fluctuating momentum. Despite these setbacks, women entrepreneurs continue to drive innovation, but strong financial backing, mentorship, and ecosystem support is crucial to foster a more consistent rise in women-led unicorns. Women-led development is a key priority of our Prime Minister and their agenda with the vision that women-led startups will place India on the global map in the years to come, and our women entrepreneurs have the potential to realize that goal. Loans under Mudra Yojana scheme for women can be used to set up a new business, expand an existing business, or modernize existing business with latest technology and tools. The age limit for women who can avail of such loans under the Mudra scheme is 65 years and the minimum age requirement is 18 years. There is last night only, I was sifting through the internet, and there is I don't know how to, I will give it to you. You can share it. There is a Startup India, I think, website, and they have elaborate this thing that how to apply, who are eligible, and all these things. So this is the data. And the venture capitalist firm, Priya, you want to?
This is actually not our topic per se, and I don't know whether it's interesting enough for the law students because, you know, business is something very different ball game term completely. But my experience, having been on the managing committee of PhD Chamber of Commerce, which is an MSME chamber, and where we have been working with encouraging women to come forward and, you know, share their thoughts and share their projects and see if we could help them get funding from the big firms, venture capital firms and other business organizations, has been that, you know, it's usually women come up with very good ideas, But to put them together, they always have a team which is a combination of men and women, which is very heartening because I find women being very more inclusive to putting a team together of not necessarily all women, but men and women. Whereas when we have seen in our conferences and seminars at the PhD chamber, when men have, I mean, there have been some presentations by men, it would be an all men's team. And it wouldn't occur to them to have a woman as part of their team to, put together a startup. So, which was something very, acceptable. I think the general acceptance is there that, all right, it's all men's team, which has come. So, I don't know whether it's difficult. I think it's generally difficult to get funding for a startup. The idea behind a startup should be good. And whether it's a women-oriented startup or a man-oriented startup, the funding comes. And there is, as you mentioned, the government is very keen to, give opportunities for startups. There are so many more startups now, as you see. But in the legal field, I find there are two groups of young lawyers or lawyers. One is based from Chennai and one is from Bangalore, who have started legal kind of putting together things for lawyers and for the judiciary, where they're collating everything together at a place, at a site, and sharing that information on very nominal prices. One in Delhi, which we have come across, is called Lawyers for Lawyer. So if you say it's lawyers and 4 in between and lawyers. So that website is started by a young lawyer from Rohini Court, where he has put together all the court, district court, all from right from the Supreme Court, all the links, the bare acts, the documents which are required for filing your papers in court. So it's a startup which is in Delhi based. It is free for everyone to download, and you young students would love to go to it, and you can log into any court in Delhi and see what's happening in the courts. The other one which I found very interesting in Delhi again is a site called Zebra, which is you can download all your court orders. It's a case diary for you on your mobiles or your laptops. Once you feed in a case, then automatically that website picks up your cases. And automatically orders come in that, and automatically gives you the case status and the data. And there's a nominal charge of about 1,200 rupees. I don't know how they sustain themselves, but I think, from a legal perspective as a lawyer, these kind of websites are very handy. Then there's this young lady in Delhi High Court, Mani Gupta, who has started a kind of a newsletter or a website which uploads your daily orders of all the courts, the important daily orders of all the courts, and which you can access if you just become a member, and you can access all the orders. So I think it's fascinating with AI and with the kind of funding which is coming in. It's absolutely fascinating for us lawyers also, and I'm sure for the judges, for the law interns, law clerks, to just go onto these sites and get information which you probably wouldn't get in Google, or would you take time to do it. So yes, we are progressing. These are some examples which I know, and I'm sure a lot more people would invest in startups or all these kind of websites, at least for the legal fraternity. Thank you.
I would like to add, as far as business is concerned, I was independent director of 2 companies, Minda Sai and Power Grid Corporation India Limited. And I will say it's only because of the reservation. Because the Ministry of Corporate Affairs or Companies Act provides for it, when the company has a profit more than 300 crore, they must have a female independent director. So, because for a woman to be an independent director, it's very difficult. Because you are not moving in that area. You are not moving amongst them. You are not part of them. As Priya also said, that they don't include women. It's a fact that you are not moving among that group of directors, or those who are on board of many, those who are directors in many boards. You are not their friends. I'm saying women. So women can come forward certainly when there is a reservation, when she will get an opportunity that it is meant for women. And also, ma'am, for lower judiciary, as far as I remember, UP has 20% reservation for women in the lower judiciary. So certain states in the police have reservation for the women. So for a gender inclusiveness or for ensuring rights of women, reservation is also a very impactful and a powerful tool.
In the Delhi judiciary, at one point of time, there was more than 60% women and 30% men. So without reservation, we kind of overtook the this thing. So therefore, in our city, we didn't think that was necessary. That's all I was saying. It benefits if we have the pool. As I said, you straight away say 1/3 has to be given. Then you know that you have the numbers. Otherwise, the question comes, oh, we have kept it, but it's going waste. You know, that's worse.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for this informative and extremely thought-provoking session.
Right, so with this, we come to the end of this panel discussion. Thank you, respected dignitaries, for the enlightening session. Now, I would request Ms. Ayushi Chopra, HOD, Journalism and Mass Communication Department, and Dr. Reena Gupta, HOD, Management Department, BVIMR, to come up on the stage to felicitate our dignitaries. Yes, ma'am. Could I please request Ayushi ma'am and Reena ma'am to felicitate Advocate Sangeeta Mehrotra. Audience, can I have a huge round of applause? Advocate Sangeeta Mehrotra ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am. It was a very enlightening talk. Could I please request Senior Advocate Priya Hingorani to come up for the felicitation? Senior Advocate Priya Hingorani, ma'am. Could I now request Honorable Jyotika Kalra ma'am to come up for the felicitation ceremony? It's a beautiful sari indeed, ma'am. Yeah. Yeah. Can I now request Honorable Justice Asha Menon ma'am to come up for the felicitation ceremony? Honorable Justice Asha Menon ma'am. Audience, can I have a huge round of applause? Thank you, Ayushi ma'am and Dr. Reena ma'am. Now, could I please request the panel to come downstairs for a group photograph, and I would request the audience to stand on their respective seats for the group photo, and after the photo, they must sit down. Thank you so much.